What was he on about? My body, mister, come figure it out with the Sonnet Sisters.
Neighbours, Godspeed. Welcome to Sonnet Sisters. My name is Anna, and today I will be discussing the meaning of sonnet number 3.
What is the meaning of this?
If you've been following along with us from the beginning, then you'll be aware that some of Shakespeare's sonnets were commissioned to convince a young man who was refusing to marry and have children. There are a fair chunk of these sonnets called, sometimes referred to as the Fair Lord sonnets or the Procreation sonnets, and they are all about convincing a supposedly young, beautiful man to have children because he's beautiful. Sonnet number 3 is one of those sonnets, so let's go into the analysis of it with that in mind. So with that one preconception in mind, I'm going to now go through the sonnet line by line or thought by thought and look at the meaning behind any odd words or phrases or things that might not be as they seem. So I'm going to read the whole first quatrain because I believe it's a full sentiment really, even though there is quite a lot in there, and then we'll dig into it a bit deeper. Look in thy glass and tell the face thou viewest. Now is the time that face should form another, whose fresh repair if now thou not renewest, thou dost beguile the world, unbless some mother. Glass here means mirror, so this is suggesting look in the mirror and tell yourself. Now is the time that face should form another, so now is a good time to reproduce your face. Whose fresh repair, which is said to mean youthful condition, if now thou not renewest, so if you don't renew the youth of your face right now, thou dost beguile the world, so cheat or trick the world, unbless some mother, so deprive some woman of the blessing of being a mother. So this is saying if you decide not to have children now and reproduce your beauty, your face now, you are cheating the world out of something, and you're taking something away. You're taking away an opportunity from a womankind, probably. And then the second quatrain can be divided into 2 bits, I think. For where is she so fair whose uneared womb disdains the tillage of thy husbandry? Fair often means beautiful in Shakespeare time. Unaired or uneared is a really interesting term because it can mean a million things, and I'm torn on whether it would be better read or said, because read, the pronunciation isn't there, so you can imagine it, and the potential meanings are all still valid. Once you've said the word out loud, you've made a decision about what it means, because the pronunciation limits the potential meanings. So it could mean unfecundated, so not made fruitful, untilled, which brings us into the theme of farming, which is a lovely tie which comes up again and again between bodies and reproduction and the tilling of land, farming, fruit, blossoming, lots of stuff like that. Uneared, as in without ears of corn, so a field without ears of corn, a field without produce. Unaired, so sort of unshared, put out into the air. It's really hard to communicate all the different meanings of this word because there are so many different potential spellings, I guess, because it's spelt one way on the page, and then when you say it aloud, it evokes all these other potential meanings, some of which have different spellings, and I don't think that makes them any less valid or relevant or potentially the right way to take it, because that's what poetry is. You can take it how you like it. Also, there's the potential meaning of unaired, as in heir to the throne, so without an heir. So a womb without an heir. Unaired womb also, let's be honest, is quite a blatant suggestion that this woman would be a virgin. Where is so beautiful a virgin in existence that she would reject the opportunity to have sex with you? Because of course. So what do you think? Is that better spoken or read? Silently, obviously. And disdains the tillage of thy husbandry, tillage being sexual ploughing, and husbandry with dual meanings, bringing back the farming metaphor, so husbandry being agricultural cultivation, again, which leads to produce and fruit and gain, that being a cyclical thing. Shakespeare brings up a lot of the idea that life is cyclical and transient, but only if we reproduce, and if we don't, we die when we die. If we produce children, our life continues in some way, and if they have children, etc. The other meaning of husbandry, of course, potentially being a play on the role of the husband, i.e. to provide children via sex. So what those two lines are saying or asking: where is she so fair, whose uneared womb disdains the tillage of thy husbandry? Where is the woman so beautiful that she would turn you down, that she would reject the opportunity to mate with you? The next two lines relate back to sonnet number 1 in a way, because they are bringing in the element of selfishness and challenging the sonnetee's potential selfishness and blaming that for them deciding not to have children. Or who is he so fond will be the tomb of his self-love to stop posterity. So fond being foolish or infatuated. Who is he that is so infatuated with himself and with his own selfish desires, his own pleasure? I guess this person is enjoying being single or being not a parent, free. Who is he so fond of that, and that is such a foolish joy, that he would decide to stop posterity, so halt the progression of future generations. So it's very much reiterating the idea that to decide not to have children is a very selfish act. Thou art thy mother's glass, and she in thee calls back the lovely April of her prime. So those next two lines are another thought in themselves, and bringing back the running theme of glass, mirrors, windows. So you are a reflection of your mother, and when she looks at you, thou art thy mother's glass, and she in thee. So she's looking at you as if she's looking into a mirror or a window to her past. She calls back the lovely April of her prime. So she's remembering fondly, through looking at your face, what she was like at your age. Maybe that's about more than aesthetics. Maybe it isn't. But that's a nice thought too. And the next two lines kind of continue that thought or develop on that thought. So thou through windows of thine age shalt see, despite of wrinkles, this thy golden time. In the same way that your mother sees her youth in you, you will be able to relive your youth, which you're enjoying now, in your children. Obviously, the subtext of that is if you decide not to have kids, you won't ever be able to relive this now very lovely, tiny moment of your best years. It could also, maybe, be to do with looking at his mother and seeing through her wrinkles to her beauty and to the joy of parenthood, and enjoying the idea of his own future in that role, maybe. And then we reach our final couplet, so the driving home of the message. But if thou live remembered not to be, die single and thine image dies with thee. So the first line is fairly simple: if you live to be forgotten. And die single has potentially two meanings, so a very literal one, die single, without partner, without children. It could also be an allusion to masturbation. Orgasm is known in French as petit mort, little death. So die single is kind of a play on orgasming alone. Die single, so die without a partner, or arrive without a partner. And thine image dies with thee. So if you live to be forgotten, if you die single, unmarried, having not produced children, if you masturbate rather than have sex with a woman in order to have children, then your beauty will die when you die. This sonnet stylistically reflects the first two in its final couplet. Very similar endings. So the first sonnet ended with the grave and thee. Second sonnet ended with thou feelst it cold, talking about the blood in the body. You will feel it cold. So very much about dying again. And this one, thine image dies with thee. It's all about death. It's all about running out, life running out, and specifically the sonnetee dying. So we've talked about themes a bit. There's the theme of farming, the tillage, the husbandry, all this imagery of cultivation, agricultural growth, blooming, blossoming, that runs throughout these procreation sonnets and are definitely present in this one. There's also the theme of glass, as in mirrors or windows, and look in thy glass is potentially also a reference to Narcissus, which brings in Shakespeare's classical reading and reiterates the idea that the addressee, the subject of the sonnet, is being selfish and self-loving in deciding not to have children, and is in love with himself and with his beauty, and that potentially that is a tool, that is a bit of leverage that the person addressing the poem to them, a bit of leverage that they have to convince somebody to have children, because, you know, your beauty will live on, and maybe if this person is narcissistic enough, that will be a good enough reason to decide to have children. In keeping with the Fair Lord sonnets, this one really displays Shakespeare's obsession with mortality and with the ravages of time. He talks about wrinkles and age a lot. Maybe these poems were for a purpose, like the Commission. Maybe they were his way of working through some of his issues with confronting death, confronting the transience of life. Maybe these were his own desperate attempts at posterity to leave something behind. Maybe they were sort of written in anguish at not being able to leave more behind. There's also something really interesting going on structurally in this sonnet, which is that the first quatrain is entirely comprised of feminine endings, so unstressed syllables form the endings of each line in the first quatrain. So, look in thy glass and tell the face thou viewest. So it's almost iambic pentameter, but then there's this tiny little extra bit at the end. And that has a really different feel from when the sonnet kicks in the second quatrain and continues until the end with perfect iambic pentameter. It gives it a real... It dials up the power from the second quatrain to the end. For where is she so fair whose unaired womb disdains the tillage of thy husbandry? Or who is he so fond will be the tomb of his self-love to stop posterity? And it's also aligning womb and tomb in a really deliberate way, kind of delivering them up for you into contrast next to each other. So it's suggesting perhaps that an unaired womb is fatal. Womb and tomb are kind of lumping men and women together as the same ilk of fool if they decide to go against this kind of sacred purpose. Thinking about the themes that are present in this sonnet quite deliberately, conceptually at the moment, I imagine this sonnet to work really well potentially as a a woman speaking at the funeral of her husband who's just departed, in the vein of life is too short. Perhaps this husband who's just died didn't leave her a child to remember him by, and that's a sore spot for her. Maybe she's saying this to herself about it. Maybe she's, I think, saying this to another young man and suggesting you have the opportunity to make this right and to avoid this problem, this mistake. I think it would work really well if it was out in nature, so if it was at a graveyard with lots of greenery around it, maybe, because the farming, the soil, the tilling, all that kind of natural, earthy imagery is quite important, I think. And also the transience of life, the cyclical nature of life, you know, grass growing, bodies feeding the earth, you know, plants feeding humans with the air they make, all that kind of circle of life stuff. I think that is quite key to these procreation sonnets. That feels like a lot of garble for the moment, so I'm going to leave it there. Probably a bit jumbled, but hopefully that has thrown up some thought-provoking ideas. Let me know what you think of this sonnet in the comments, and let me know how you would perform it and how you would set it if you were going to stage it. So that's all for now. See thee anon.